All right, so we've got this new RedMonk report, fresh off the presses, and it's got everyone buzzing about, well, programming languages. But let's be real, it can be a bit much to unpack, right?
It's like this whole secret language itself, trying to decipher what's hot and what's not in the coding world.
And that's where we come in. We're doing a deep dive on these rankings, cutting through the noise to bring you the insights that actually matter. So before we get lost in the weeds of the rankings themselves, can you give us the lowdown on how RedMonk actually figures this stuff out?
Sure, so RedMonk pulls its data from two main places. First, there's GitHub, which is where developers basically hang out, share code, the drill.
Right, it's like the social media platform for coders.
Exactly. They track how many pull requests each language gets, which basically shows how much new code is being written.
So more pull requests, more popular the language. Makes sense.
And then they combine that with data from Stack Overflow. That's where developers go to ask and answer questions, troubleshoot problems.
It's like the ultimate coding forum. I've definitely gotten lost in the Stack Overflow rabbit hole a time or two.
We've all been there. But yeah, they look at how active those language communities are, how many questions, how many answers to gauge the overall buzz.
So it's a mix of real coding action and, like, the chatter around it. Smart approach. Okay, enough with the tech talk. Let's get to the heart of it. What languages are sitting on the iron throne of this coding kingdom, huh?
Well, at the top, it's the usual suspects, really. JavaScript, Python, and Java are still holding strong.
Those names are always up there.
Ugh.
What is it about those languages that just keeps them at the top? It's got to be more than just name recognition, right?
It's a whole bunch of things. First off, they're like those Swiss Army knives. You can use them for practically anything. JavaScript powers the web, Python's the darling of data science, and Java's the backbone of tons of big business applications.
So versatile. You got to respect that.
Totally. Plus, they've got these huge, super active communities. And that means tons of support, resources, you name it, makes it a lot easier for someone just starting out to pick them up, too.
That community aspect is so key. It's like having a built-in safety net when you're learning the ropes. Okay, so the veterans are still kicking. But what about the up-and-comers? Any surprises in the rankings this time around?
One to watch is definitely TypeScript. It's been climbing steadily, and it's actually sitting pretty in 6th place now. This quarter, it's even managed to snag the entire 6th spot for the first time.
TypeScript. That rings a bell. Remind me, what's so special about it again?
Think of it like JavaScript, but with a bit more, let's say, structure. It brings some order to the chaos, which developers, especially those working on those massive projects, really appreciate.
All right. It's like JavaScript's more organized and disciplined sibling. I can see the appeal there. Anything else catching your eye as you're scrolling through these rankings?
The steady rise of Kotlin and Scala is pretty interesting. They're both tied for 14th, and what's cool about them is that they really highlight how powerful the Java virtual machine, or JVM, still is.
JVM. Sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie. Break it down for us.
Basically, it's like a universal translator for programming languages.
So you're saying the JVM allows these different languages to, what, talk to each other? That's pretty slick.
Exactly. It's what makes languages like Kotlin and Scala, which are big in Android development and backend systems, so powerful.
So we've got the old guard still on top, some newcomers making moves.
Yeah.
But what about the languages that are, maybe not having their best moment? Any big falls from grace?
Objective-C, the language that built so many Apple products, is definitely on a downward trend.
Really? I feel like back in the day, if you were doing any app development, Objective-C was the language to know. What happened?
It's just been overshadowed by its newer, shinier siblings, Swift. That's Apple's favorite now. But hey, it's a testament to Objective-C that it's still hanging in there at 17th.
Yeah, it's like that saying, out with the old, in with the new. Speaking of new, last time we were chatting about these rankings, you mentioned a few languages to keep an eye on. What's the latest on those?
Let's see. Bicep, that cloud-focused one, it's made a pretty good jump. And then there's Zig, known for being super fast and efficient. That one's climbed 10 spots.
Not too shabby. Any big surprises?
Actually, yeah. Ballerina. It's a general-purpose language, and it's skyrocketed all the way to 61st place.
Ballerina, huh? That's a new one for me. What's the story there? Why this sudden popularity?
Well, it's developed by WSO2, and it's known for being very versatile and user-friendly. I think the big thing is how much it's jumped in the rankings. That tells you it's probably not just a fad, Definitely one to keep an eye on.
It's crazy how quickly things change in the tech world, right? One minute you're top dog, the next you're trying to catch up.
That's the truth. Being able to learn new languages, new tech, it's really crucial in this field. Got to be adaptable.
Absolutely. So we've been talking about a lot of movement, but something that always strikes me is how consistent that top 20 list stays. What does that tell us about, like, the big picture of software development?
It's interesting, right? On the one hand, it shows a certain level of, I guess, maturity in the field. Like the languages that power most of the digital stuff we use every day, they're well established, they're well documented. There's a ton of support out there.
Right, it's like you've got a really solid foundation to build on.
Exactly. But then on the other hand, it also highlights how much resistance there is to change. Switching to a new language, it can be a big investment for companies, for developers. So there's this kind of inertia to just stick with what works.
Makes sense. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, as they say.
Right. So even though there's all this innovation happening, all these new languages popping up, only a few actually break through and really become mainstream.
It's like a recipe, right? You need the right combination of things to really make it work. Speaking of which, are there any languages that, despite having a lot of potential, they just haven't quite gained traction?
You know, the report actually mentioned Dart and Rust, two languages that we've talked about before. They're still popular, but it seems like they're having some, let's say, growing pains within their communities.
Growing pains, huh? What does that even look like for a programming language?
It could be anything from trouble attracting new users to maybe challenges in deciding like what direction the language should go in. It's a good reminder that just being technically found isn't always enough. You need that strong community too.
Yeah, a language is only as good as the people using it, developing it, contributing to it. It's like a garden, you
Yeah.
know? You got to nurture it if you want it to thrive.
I love that analogy. And like a garden, the more diversity, the better.
Absolutely. But that actually brings up a good point. For someone just getting started in all this, with so many languages out there, how do they even choose which one to learn?
That's a great question, and there's no easy answer. It really depends on what you're hoping to get out of it. If you're looking for like the fastest path to a job, then yeah, mastering one of those top languages is probably a good bet. But if you're more interested in being on the cutting edge, exploring new ideas, then maybe diving into a newer language could be really rewarding.
So it's about finding that balance between what's practical and what really sparks your curiosity.
Yeah.
But realistically, how do you even begin to narrow it down? There are so many options. It's overwhelming. You can feel like you're just staring at this giant wall of programming languages, right? Like,
Yeah.
where do you even begin?
Yeah, it's a lot. But I always tell people to think about it kind of like choosing a musical instrument, you know?
Hmm.
Are you going to go with the piano? It's popular, it's versatile. Or are you going to be drawn to something a little more, I don't know, unique, like the cello, maybe?
I like that analogy. So if you're just starting out, what are some of the things you should be thinking about when you're picking that first language or that first instrument?
Well, first off, what are you actually interested in? What do you want to build? Are you into web development, data science, game development? Certain languages are going to be better suited for certain things.
So figure out what you're passionate about, then see what languages align with that.
Exactly. And it's never a bad idea to like check out the job market too. As much as we love the idea of coding for pure passion, knowing there's a demand for your skills, that can be pretty helpful.
For sure, especially if you're trying to break into the tech industry. Practicality matters.
Speaking of the future, the report mentioned some pretty big changes that might be on the horizon, like AI and WebAssembly are really starting to gain some steam. How do you see all of that impacting the programming language scene down the line?
Oh, it's going to be huge. I mean, the report even hinted that we might be on the verge of, like, a major shift. Think about it as AI gets more and more advanced and we start doing more computing right there in the browser with WebAssembly. We're going to need languages that can keep up. It's like we're entering a whole new world of computing.
Right.
Those languages that can adapt, those are the ones that'll thrive.
Exactly. We might even see entirely new languages pop up, languages specifically designed for working with AI or creating those super fast web applications with WebAssembly.
Now that is exciting. Imagine, like, writing code, not just for computers, but for AI agents that can actually understand what you're trying to do. Or building those crazy, fast web experiences that work perfectly no matter what device you're on.
It's a future full of possibilities. And who knows, maybe one of our listeners will be the one to create the next big programming language, the one that defines this new era.
I love that thought. All right, so to wrap up our deep dive into this RedMonk ranking report, I think the biggest takeaway is that the programming world is anything but static.
Totally. It's constantly changing, constantly evolving, new tech, new trends, new ideas from developers all over the world. It keeps things interesting, that's for sure.
It really is a good reminder that learning never stops in this field. Whether you're just starting out or you've been coding for years, There's always something new to discover, a new language to learn, a new challenge to tackle.
Couldn't agree more. Keep that curiosity alive, be ready to adapt, and just keep exploring. Who knows what amazing things you might create.
Beautifully said. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Until next time, happy coding, everyone. Now you can follow Code Impact Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, and all other podcast networks.